All right, looks like we've got audio here, so we're ready to go. This is my July design stream, so welcome to that. It's the first design stream. Oh, hey Blake. Welcome. Yes, my design diary, I should say. It's the first design diary I've done on this channel. But I've been away for a while from the channel because my work has really been insane. It's been a lot of work lately. It's the end of the semester, so I've had a lot to do. But I'm glad to get back to this. So let's talk about what I have been doing while I've been away from the channel. The first thing I did was I submitted my Macchiato Monsters module to the Halls of the Stormlord to Gauntlet Codex, the zine of the Gauntlet RPG community. So that's going to be coming out, I guess, sometime in the fall. I think that's probably when it's scheduled to come out. Look forward to that. If you haven't joined the Gauntlet, then join the Gauntlet, because the Gauntlet's awesome, and you should be a part of that. It is, for those of you who don't know, a RPG community that includes podcasts, Slack channel for RPG discussions. It includes open table online games you can join up with. It includes Gauntlet Con, which is coming in October. It is an online gaming convention, tabletop RPG convention. It includes Gauntlet Zine, the Codex Zine, yes, which I wrote Halls of the Stormlord for. What else do we do? We have a blog. Yes, I've been contributing to the blog as well. So we've got a lot going on. There's a G+ community. There's a Twitter. There's all kinds of stuff. So, and also we're going to have games on demand starting soon too. I don't think that's going to be a thing I'll be able to participate in very much because of the perpetual problem of time zones. But I am really excited to see where that goes, because Yoshi Krillman is running that, and it looks like he is going to do an awesome job. Yes, so that's all super cool. But yes, Halls of the Stormlord, it's been play tested, it's been submitted, it's in the editing process. It will be coming out. I can't wait to see what it looks like on the page. So carrying on, what else have I been doing? I've been watching reactions to All Systems Nominal. So if you're just checking out for the first time, this is the game All Systems Nominal. It's still in the alpha stage, but I got an icon, or sorry, a logo for it. That's exciting. I have that all sorted out. It is a mecha RPG. Quite inspired by Wodu Turbo, Blades in the Dark, and also Lancer. Very lightweight, very short RPG in the mode of Wodu Turbo, taking a lot of mechanics from Blades in the Dark, and also just sort of taking a few ideas here and there from Lancer in terms of how to design a mecha game. I've been able to playtest this a little bit, and I mean a little bit. I've been able to go through character creation before my laptop battery died on me. I hope to get a full playtest session in soon, and I will have a playtest in August that is on the Gauntlet Hangouts calendar, the open table calendar. So that's very exciting. I've had a lot of interest in that playtest session, and we're going to be doing a BattleTech scenario, so it's going to be a lot of fun. I've been preparing for that. Right. But as far as reactions to the game go, it's been really, really interesting to see people in the Gauntlet Slack pick up the game and take a look at it and try to puzzle through it. And I have this distinct memory of one day I woke up I like grabbed my phone. I was kind of in a groggy state of mind, and I looked through the RPG chat channel on the Gauntlet Slack, and it was like people were talking about All Systems Nominal, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. And people are they sort of had these like various ideas about how to play the game, or how to run it, or what they would add to it, or what they thought they needed in the game. And there was a part of me as a designer that was like, oh no, I've made a game that doesn't make sense. I've made a game that is incoherent, or that people don't understand my design intentions. But actually, you know, once I kind of woke up a little bit more and my brain started functioning again, I was like, oh no, wait, that was exactly the reaction that I was designing for. That, right, I wanted to make an incomplete game. I wanted to make a game that would be somewhat, that would make people think, right? Because I think that is a lot of what World of Dungeons does. It's a lot of what Wodu Turbo does. It's very terse, and it asks you to bring a lot to the game. And I kind of wanted this game to be a little bit of a like a Rorschach test. Like you bring to the game what you want to see in it, right? And I wanted it to be a little bit of a puzzle to figure out, like, how do you run this thing? How do you make this into a full game instead of just the outline of something? So when I saw people in the Slack actually doing that, and I've actually had people kind of message me with like design ideas that they're working on to use with the game, that's all been really exciting to me once I actually woke up and was like, oh yeah, this is actually what this game was designed to do. I definitely have plans to write games that are much more explicit and much more fully specified and more complete, but the design intention with this sort of alpha version of All Systems Nominal was to make something that was not that. That was something that people could, you know, sort of use as a starting point for building out their own mecha game that they wanted to play. So I think that has been a positive outcome. It's just a matter that remains to be seen whether people pick it up and they sort of find it interesting and something that they can actually use to build campaigns that they find enjoyable, like many people have done with World of Dungeons, or if it's simply too terse and people just find it perplexing and go on to something that is a little bit more fleshed out. Yeah, so that's been really interesting to watch. Setting up the playtesting, so I had the original playtest document. Here we go. This was for my original playtest I tried to organize but fell through. And all I really had here was, as you can see on the left-hand side, the lances that are on this side of Vincent's Vigilantes, which is a mercenary unit in the Battletech universe, and that the PCs are going to be a part of. I just had those like sort of spelled out, like, okay, like what kinds of mechs are in these units. And like, to be clear, oh, there's a formatting error here. Let's see if we turn off print layout. That'll make more sense. Yes. Yeah, so you can see there's different mechs on the player side. There's a company on this side, right? 3 lances, and then a company on the enemy side. And I rolled up these mechs using the rules in Battletech. So in the case of the enemies, these are FedCom forces, Federated Commonwealth forces, but actually part of the Lyrian Commonwealth, for those of you who know your Battletech lore. And so I use those tables to roll up what the enemies might have. And then I used the tables from the MechWarrior Mercenaries game to roll up what the Vincent's Vigilantes had. And so what I did there was I actually I took the normal tables for rolling up a unit based on what faction they belong to, and I did like a meta level roll to pick which faction each mech would come from. So you get in this mercenary unit like Draconis Combine mechs, you get in this mercenary unit like Comstar mechs, like any kind of mech that would be in the BattleTech book for the appropriate year, which I think is like 3054 or something, is in that sort of pool and has been pulled in. So yeah, to be clear, this game, All Systems Nominal, yeah, post-clan invasion, directly post-clan invasion. So actually, the Vincent's Vigilantes unit does not have any post-clan tech, which is the reason why they it's the reason why they turned on the Federated Commonwealth and turned pirate in the first place, is because the FedCom military refused to give them that tech during the clan invasion and basically sent them on a suicide mission. So now they are taking all their forces and going on and raiding Coventry 3, which is a, you know, FedCom industrial world, to try to steal some of that post-clan tech to use for themselves. But the FedCom forces will have a little bit of that stuff going on. Like, you can see that this Daikyu has ERPPC and that kind of thing. Yeah. So you can see their target, all that kind of stuff. This is all from the Objective Raids book in BattleTech. It's like a MechWarrior Splat book that came out a long time ago. Yeah. So that's all cool. And I've started to build out a 731, which is a way of organizing adventures that was first created by Jason Cordova, the sort of primary founder and administrator of the Gauntlet, as a way of doing Dungeon World adventures. So the point here is you get 7 scenes, 3 things that can happen in them, and then like 1 sensory thing to tell the players about. So I've started to work on this, but it's not finished yet. But this will be there for the play test, and more than you know, like a linear sequence of things that have to happen on the mission. This is more like a series of locations or situations that I might want to pull on according to how the mission goes for the unit. So yeah, it's coming along. It's coming along. It's going to take a little bit more work, but we're getting there. We're getting there. And it's doing the thing I wanted, right? Where All Systems Nominal is not a BattleTech game, but it is sort of intercompatible with BattleTech, right? And the playtest that I am running of the game, which is just a one-on-one game, I am using the Front Mission universe for, not the BattleTech. So I'm trying to test out just how that sort of fiction agnostic sort of way of doing things works with this game, because I think that's one of the strengths of World of Dungeons, and I wanted to make a mecha game that would allow you to do, excuse me, would allow you to do the same thing with mecha fiction, instead of just being tied to one setting. All right, so what else have I been doing? I've been getting art assets for All Systems Nominal together. I've been trying to find artists or illustrators to work with, and I've obviously got this logo sorted, so that's good. I've been running a 2-player Urban Shadows game. I finished that just last weekend. So That's been fantastic. Really, really good. I repurposed a lot of prep that I did for another Urban Shadows, like 4-player game that I had set in Vancouver, and just adapted that. Is it hard with only 2 players due to the debt reliance in the game? I didn't find it was especially hard, no. Not really. No, that worked fine. I'm trying to think about what the actual pain points were with running a 2-player game. What was a problem? So one obvious thing is that you have to kind of approach the game a little bit differently in terms of your threats, because they roll out a little bit more slowly than you would find in a 4-player game of Urban Shadows, because you can only do so much in one session, and you can only have the one PC meet so many people in one session before you want to wrap it up. So rolling out threats was something that took longer, and in the end I kind of ended up with just like 3 threats instead of 4 in my storm, which is sort of the meta threat that you introduce in Urban Shadows campaigns. So that was a definite challenge. Obviously there's also a lot less reliance on help or interfere rules. And another thing I had to hack into the game, which is kind of a thing I do anyway, but did I go into more granular day-to-day life? Not really, no. No. What I did was I really leaned on the advancement mechanic, where you go to the different factions before you can advance. I really leaned on that as a pacing mechanism, and I found that to be extremely helpful, because it gave the player sort of a menu of choices to choose from, and it gave a little bit of excuse me, player direction to the fiction, and it also, just by looking at the character sheet before the session, it gave me an idea of what sorts of characters, like NPCs or threats, I might want to prep for that session. So one thing I did in terms of sort of the day-to-day or sort of quotidian stuff is I had one of the factions, I had a Knight faction, be very closely related to the PC. So the PC was a hunter, but she was living with basically with a pack of werewolves. But she wasn't a werewolf hunter; she was a dragon hunter. So that meant that when she went home and did her sort of day-to-day stuff, she also got to hit the Knight faction. So it meant that there was a reason for her to go home mechanically as well as fictionally. So that was really, really, really good. Definitely played on a lot of personal relationships with the NPCs. And one thing I did there that was really important was to use the intimacy moves, like the relevant intimacy moves for the NPCs on the player. So if she got intimate with a wizard, then the wizard intimacy move would trigger. If she got intimate with a dragon, the dragon intimacy move would trigger. So because that is like a player-initiated thing, the fact that it's reciprocal doesn't really cause problems, because like the ways that those are set up, it's not like I have to do GM-facing roles. It's still player-facing. Yeah, that's a third Urban Shadows game I've heard of where a hunter hangs with werewolves. I think that makes a lot of sense, because they have similar concerns. The werewolf is really really interested and concerned with community and turf. And the hunter is a character that is really, really concerned with their obligations to other people. So there's a lot of sort of overlap between the two. And also just like, I don't know, I guess there's a kind of earnestness about the wolf that maybe overlaps with the hunter in some ways, as opposed to some of the other characters in the game, definitely. But yeah, that was a really good dynamic, really good relationship. Just a great campaign I ran. So it was, yeah, one of my favorite PBTA games I've ever run, for sure. So if you are interested in playing 2-player Urban Shadows, I would definitely say give it a shot. I think the game holds up very well. And you know, I think I first got the idea to do that from listening to Kate Bullock on the Gauntlet podcast, talking about how much she likes running Urban Shadows 2-player. And you can actually check out, I think there's a pocket-sized play podcast episode or short series of her running a 2-player Urban Shadows game that's worth checking out. So give it a shot. It is a really, really good game. And if you ever want to play a Bloodborne version of Urban Shadows, then check out my game, Yharnam Shadows, which is a hack of Urban Shadows designed to be played in the Bloodborne universe. So yeah, that's a good time. Give it a shot if you like From Software games. All right. As for the next thing, preparing my Vagabonds of David series for Gauntlet Hangouts. So I have gotten started on that. I've made up a hex map to use in the hex crawl that I've designed. So we'll be getting into this more in the next stream. Yeah, this is from the meter mark setting designed for Torchbearer. But I've decided to use it with Vagabonds of David because they both have this sort of British Isles Viking-esque interest. So I thought that this would be a good chance to finally get to use Meter Mark after I kickstarted it. So yes, so here we have, as you can see, a fairly large hex map. But even though this game is only 2 4-hour sessions, I think it's going to work out because the characters are going to be mounted on horseback, so they will be able to move faster than normal. And actually, if you look here at the reference map, so you can kind of see that the part that I made into the hex map is this area here, more or less. It goes down to around here. And I used the scale that is given here. So I calculated out how much you can walk in a day, and then basically used this days per unit scale, and then multiplied that by the distance to get the scale of the map. And I actually have the real scale of the meter mark map because it is 2 sessions. So it's half the size of the actual meter mark area, but I think it should be plenty for 2 sessions of play. The characters will be going from here, Tarn Tanleth, down to the Saki Downs. So that's going to be an interesting little journey that they take. Going to go across some grasslands, maybe go along some coast, maybe through some forest, across some rivers. There's a lake and stuff. They might stop in at this castle. And there's a bunch of hills here. So yeah, pretty excited about this. What I need to do in our sort of next stream that I'm going to do is to come up with the random encounter tables for that. So that's going to be my task for the next stream. But that's where I'm at with progress here. I also wrote up the premise for this. Here we are. Yeah, so I wrote out like a pitch for the Gauntlet Hangouts site, put it up there to get people interested in the game. So I based this a lot on the information that is included in the MeterMark setting, but I added in some original characters. You can see it's rather short, but I think it's pretty descriptive. It says, Otkul, War Chief of the Got Host, Conqueror of Vanskradal, Lord of Frostguard and the Gottmark, has ruled for 20 years with wisdom and strength. He has found a new home for the Gots in the Metermark, and none would doubt his right to rule. Yet after long years, the War Chief has grown aged and is without an heir. His son Othmar and daughter Oda were slain in heroic battle against the Bjornings, and he has had no children since that grim day. Among the Got there has been much agitation, as each seeks to prove themselves worthy to take up Otkul's title and lead the host to war. Among that number is Adelace, daughter of the disgraced grave Notker, who has made a great boast in the halls of Frostguard that she will travel to Sigrun's Mirror, deep in the mist-shrouded Saki Downs, and there receive from Sigrun Shieldbreaker, Lady of Battles, a mark of her right to rule. The fog of drink and the din of last night's boasting has passed, and you, Adelace's sworn comrades, set out with your sister on a quest south, to the lands of the Bjornings and to Sigrun's Mirror, known only to you in song and tale. Will you prove your worth to the Lady of Battles, or will your memory fade into the mist? What matters is not the boast, but the deed. Mount your horse and ride for the depthless mirror. So that's the premise here. My thinking was to with this hex crawl to give the PCs a clear destination down here. Yeah, totally. 13th Warrior would be a reasonable pull there. Yes, except I think that the sort of key difference between 13th Warrior and this scenario is that I want the PCs to mostly have like known each other for a long time, to have grown up with each other. That they're just a bunch of friends, and you know, their friend Adelace has made this crazy boast, but they're gonna have her back because they're friends, right? It's gonna be a road trip. So it's not the foreigner coming into the situation, and I think that is gonna present a little bit of a challenge, because you know the advantage in the 13th Warrior of having that main character be a foreigner is that they can serve as an audience surrogate, right? They can help the audience get used to the setting, whereas in the case of this adventure, it's probably going to be the case that like all the PCs are of the same culture, and so we're not really going to have the opportunity so much to have someone who is not in the know ask questions about the culture. Instead, it's going to be much more like meta level. I will have to explain things because, as is typical in a lot of campaigns, players do not bother to read the setting materials. So I'm going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting there in terms of making the setting accessible to the players, especially people who are not that familiar with Norse society or with maybe some of the conventions of the genre. So I'm interested to see how that all plays out. But what I have done to make life easier for myself is to give them a clear starting point and a clear destination, a clear objective, and also a NPC that they can sort of rally around and which can anchor the party in some kind of meaningful direction. Because I feel like if you're just going to do straight like West Marches style hex crawling with no set premise or destination, that can be fine, but it's something I would not want to attempt in 2 sessions of play. So I'm trying to give a semi-directed experience within the context of the randomly generated, or sorry, the procedurally generated chaos of a hex crawl. Yes. So things I'm going to want to come up with for that are things like some points of interest or some adventure hooks or something to use here in Jörnkloster. Yes, West Marches relies on proactive players. I completely agree with that. And I think that the challenge with using that approach in this game would be that the players would feel out of their depth with the setting materials, right? It's not a huge setting, like it's not enormous, but it is a little bit alien compared to what you would see in, say, Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like Dungeons and Dragons is like, you know, its own thing, its own genre. Whereas Meter Mark is something that's calling back much more to a little bit of Tolkien and also just a lot of Norse mythology. And obviously Tolkien's based on that, so yeah, that's a challenge. I think that you would run into kind of a similar problem that you can have in Blades in the Dark, where you have this big setting that is unusual, and also a lot of demands on the players to be proactive. And so I'm giving a rather clear structure to play compared to something like West Marches, just to help ease people into the setting and make it easy enough to grok. Have clearer character relationships and goals that drive the fiction. And I think that should dovetail pretty well with the way that Vagabonds of Dovid is focused on attributes, or sorry, like characteristics of the PCs. I think that there is some room to sort of like build a story of this group of friends around the PC creation in that game. So I hope that all works out. I'm really interested to see how this goes. So that's the whole Vagabonds of Dovid thing. We're going to get into that more when I get to the actual random encounter tables. So let's keep going. I have been writing for the Gauntlet blog. That stuff should be coming out soonish, I guess. Very simple things like I wrote a procedure for using in 2-player Urban Shadows, or maybe 3-player, so like 1 PC or 2 PC games, that essentially runs your character really quickly through a game of Monster Hearts and places them at the beginning of an Urban Shadows campaign. So it is a way of generating backstory for your character. And my inspiration there was hearing from the hosts of Plus One Forward that they had done this before, that they had leveled their characters out of Monster Hearts, basically, and brought them into into Urban Shadows as new PCs. Yeah, that was that was an episode with both Rach and Richard on there. Yeah, Rich. Yes. So that's been that was a really cool process, and I managed to co-write that with. Is it like a love letter? No, not really. It's more like adding a number of establishing questions. Yeah. So you have like 4-ish establishing questions for your character in Urban Shadows. This adds like another 4 questions to that list. That gives you some backstory, and that can be useful in setting up a 2-player game. It's not something I would recommend in a 4-player game because there are already enough questions there. You don't want any more than that. It's already takes a while to get through those questions. So yeah, I definitely would not recommend it for that. But if you're looking for a way to establish relationships and backstory and all that kind of thing that you might want in a 2-player game because you're so focused on this one character, I think it's going to be pretty cool to check out. And yes, and that was something I co-wrote with Lauren. So yes, that was a really cool process. And that will be up on the blog. And the other thing I wrote for the blog was it was a thing for, oh yes, it was a circles mechanic for Scum and Villainy. So that was, for those of you who are familiar with Burning Wheel, circles is a way of creating NPCs that you can use to get something you want. It's a sort of player-driven way of introducing NPCs, and I adapted that mechanic for use in Scum and Villainy to allow players to create new NPCs, but also to introduce new factions. Because, as you might have seen on a previous stream, I was making a setting for Scum and Villainy, and I didn't want to add too much to it. I established like the big players, but I didn't want to like really establish like the lower level factions that much, because I wanted to leave some room for players to help build out the world. And I didn't want to be overwhelming with too many factions, which is something that I find is not necessarily a problem in Blades in the Dark or Scum and Villainy, but, you know, because I was making a new setting, I wasn't using the default setting, I didn't want to do all the work myself of creating a huge, you know, sprawling setting. As much as I like that stuff, I just don't have time for it. So I wanted to allow for some post-gen, and that's where I introduced this circles mechanic. So that's going to be another thing coming to the Gauntlet blog. Definitely check that out. If you are interested in running Scum and Villainy, which is a pretty cool game. Yes. So, other things I did. I've been teaching World of Dungeons and Lasers and Feelings at work in my game design class. I don't have a whole lot of thoughts about that, but I do have some. I live in Japan. I've been teaching these games in an EFL, English as a Foreign Language class, and it's been really challenging, definitely. But I was able, more or less, to get across the concepts of World of Dungeons because not because the students were all that familiar with tabletop RPGs or familiar at all, or because they were even, you know, avid gamers, but because they had picked up from Pokemon a lot of the concepts of basic D&D. So there was a lot of shared conceptual frameworks and vocabulary that have been introduced into video games from D&D, which I could lean on to help teach World of Dungeons to my students. I actually found that Lasers and Feelings, although it is a simpler game, was a lot harder to explain because it is much more sort of reliant on understanding the nuances of English and sort of the in-jokes or connotations of what is written in that text. So that game, I have to run that on Friday, and I'm not too sure how that's going to go. I'm not super confident about it, but it has been definitely revealing as to sort of where there are opportunities to lean on design concepts to get over language barriers. But more importantly, I think this sort of gets to a thing that Kevin Crawford was talking about in his interview with Adam Koebel about Stars Without Number. Could you theme it on a TV show, use common genre tropes? Yes, absolutely. Laser and Feelings, I think, has a lot of common genre tropes that would be known more or less to people in Japan because of, you know, Gundam, or because of, what would be another one that would be a sort of common reference? I mean, I think Gundam is the real one, right? You know, Cowboy Bebop, but like hardly anybody in Japan has seen that, right? Like it's a show that is way more popular in the West than it is in Japan. So yeah, so Star Wars maybe, but you'd be surprised at how little popularity Star Wars has in Japan. Astro Boy, like, yeah, like Astro Boy is kind of like borderline. Sailor Moon, maybe, like, it's definitely sci-fi in a way, and it's very popular, but I don't know if it's quite going for the same thing as Lasers and Feelings. But, you know, maybe I could sort of hack the game a little bit to make it more about Magical Girl or something. That could be fun. Yeah, very Space Moon, or Space Worm versus Moonicorn. Yeah, cool. That's a good idea, though. I might think about that some more. But what I wanted to say was that you know, when Kevin Crawford was talking to Adam Koebel about Stars Without Number, he sort of made this rather opinionated point as to like why it made sense for him to use D&D as a design basis for Stars Without Number, right? So like, why not make Scum and Villainy, right? Like, why not make a game that uses a different rule system than D&D? Because, you know, D&D is designed for D&D. Why are you using that rule system, right? That was kind of the question. And what Crawford said was that there's so much ingrained player knowledge about D&D you can use to make the game accessible if you use those rules, right? The D20, the skill check, all that crap, it is stuff that just people know. And when I listened to Crawford say that, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I understand why maybe that contributed to Stars Without Number being such a success. But what I didn't really appreciate, maybe to the extent that, like, I don't know, Crawford does, was, like, how broad that knowledge base is. Like, that actually goes way beyond just D&D players. The concepts of D&D have spread and suffused our culture so much because of video games. And, you know, this is a thing that I think is really coming up a lot in Jeremy Parish's History of RPG series on US Gamer. If you want to go check that out, it's pretty good. Talking about things like Ultima, wizardry, and like what their inspirations were in D&D. But like, actually, you go down to this like current generation, people who are like 18 years old now, and like have never played a Final Fantasy game, have never played Dragon Quest, have never even played The Legend of Zelda, but they like have played Pokemon, and Pokemon is full of sort of D&D derived concepts. So that like sort of like third or fourth removed instantiation or implementation of D&D concepts can reach an enormously large audience. So when people talk about the success of D&D on Twitch, they often point to the fact that, like, you know, D&D has name recognition, or D&D has sort of first mover advantage or incumbent advantage in things like the listing of games on Twitch, right? Where it shows up and other games don't. Like, that all is totally valid. Those are good reasons for why it's successful. But I think it's also worth pointing out that there is a certain amount of conceptual and rules familiarity with D&D that many other games don't have, right? Like, Lasers and Feelings is a simple game, but it is also a little bit more unfamiliar, I think. And so I've seen that in teaching World of Dungeons, this sort of OSRE throwback game to basic D&D in Japan, which is just so far removed from my normal context of gaming. So that's kind of my point there. Yeah, NetHack, Final Fantasy, totally those make sense. Like Dragon Quest, of course. You know, even Legend of Zelda, right? Like, if you play Legend of Zelda, you can kind of understand what a hex crawl is like. HP, XP, all those concepts everywhere. You know, a lot of open world games that we have now are like basically sort of attempts to riff on the concepts of hex crawling. Magic the Gathering, World of Warcraft help to get people familiar with levels, fantasy, etc. Totally, absolutely, right? Absolutely. Yeah, it's like when people, like, you know, rag on 4E for trying to imitate Magic the Gathering, or sorry, not Magic the Gathering, World of Warcraft. It's like, well, of course, why not, right? World of Warcraft stole enormously, or imitated enormously, Warhammer, but also Dungeons and Dragons, right? It was originally going to be a Warhammer license game, but they couldn't get the license from Games Workshop, so then they went ahead and made their own property, and when they made World of Warcraft, they took a bunch of ideas from Dungeons and Dragons. So why not take those ideas back, right? And then I feel like that is a thing that just sort of happened because World of Warcraft was such an enormous cultural phenomenon. Yes. Huge. So, you know, when you're designing a game, I'm not saying you have to use the D&D rules, but just be aware. I guess this is the takeaway lesson for me. Be aware that just having simple rules does not necessarily guarantee ease of communication. because there can be complicated conceptual systems that have been spread out in the culture that people can just easily make use of. Even if at a sort of one-by-one point level, they're more complex than something like lasers and feelings. So, yeah, it's worthwhile drawing on cultural knowledge where you can. And I mean, most designers do that anyway, right? Where when people say, oh, you're designing a tabletop game, are you designing fantasy or are you designing science fiction, right? Of course, there are people who are designing outside those spaces, but the people who are trying to sell a game understand that there is an ease of reference with something like that. And you know, like even All Systems Nominal, even though it's like a mech game, and I'm drawing on like 40 years of pop culture there, it's still esoteric enough that I have a little bit of a hard time communicating some of the tropes and concepts. And you know, that's not even that esoteric. So anyway, it's a whole lot of just sort of thoughts based on that experience. Okay, the next thing I did, hacking Scum and Villainy for two-player purposes. Yes. So I wasn't able to actually run my Eidos Core campaign of Scum and Villainy because of scheduling problems. So I'm probably going to try running this at some point. I don't know when, like not now, but some point in the future as a two-player game. So I did come up with some rules modifications to Scum and Villainy to make it a little bit more useful, or sorry, functional as a two-player game, because normally it's a very group-oriented game. So I just very quickly wrote this down. My idea is to remove the crew XP trigger, right? So if in Scum and Villainy, you choose a ship, and then the ship has an XP trigger. When you fulfill this condition, your crew gets XP. And the ship-specific advancements, and to let you take ship modules as an upgrade instead of a character advancement when you advance. So what I'm saying there is keep the basic systems of the ship, right? So you have the basic stuff, but you don't have the sort of like stuff there that is meant to tie a group together, right? Like we don't need that if we're playing a two-player game because you only have one PC. So instead, you just use the very basic elements of the ship and the basic upgrades that any ship can get. Those you make available to the player as something they can take instead of an upgrade to their PC. With their own sort of PC-derived XP. And I'll zoom this in a little bit for you here. Also, give one gambit instead of 3, because there's just one player. And give you 2 extra action rating points, because you wouldn't be able to get as many helping dice. So there's no helping in the game, so and also you don't get something from your crew. So I just figured when you start out, the PC should probably start with a couple extra action rating points. Then have like a much smaller ship with like maybe one NPC to interact with. Right, like I don't want to have like a ton. If I'm the GM in a Scum and Villainy game and I have one PC, I don't want to be playing 3 NPCs on the PC side as well as the opposition. Like that's just too much. So I figure like, oh, maybe like one, more or less downtime actions. I honestly don't think that needs to change very much. That's my gut feeling there, because a lot of the downtime activities are things that are oriented towards the single player character more so than the group. That's just my feeling. I might need to change that, but my basic gut feeling there is that you probably only need the 3 downtime activities. You don't need more than that, and I also don't think you need less, maybe you could reduce it to 2, but... Or sorry, no, you start out with 2, right? Oh boy. Wait. 3 and then 2 if you're at war. Is that it? Oh man. This is how bad, like, I haven't run Blades in the Dark in such a long time now. I'm forgetting these things. This is appalling. You get 2. Yeah, you get 2. And if you're at war, you get 1. So yeah, I'd say 2 is probably enough. That's my guess. Have to see. Maybe I adjust that during the game. Tier, obviously, you're not really going to have a crew, but I was thinking, like, your character could increase their tier as a long-term project, right? So if they wanted to, say, like, get a bigger ship or hire a bunch of goons, that kind of thing they could do as a long-term project instead of having advancement off of a sheet. Add beliefs and give XP for following resolving them. So if you think about why beliefs don't work in Scum and Villainy or in Blades in the Dark, like they don't work. They're not good at all. Like, this is just... The game is not designed for them. I don't know why they're even there. But they could totally work in a 2-player game of just one PC, because the focus is on that PC and not on the crew, right? If you were really serious about following your beliefs in Blades in the Dark, it would come into conflict with the crew objectives. And that's okay, but if you're really serious about following them, I feel like you would be perpetually disappointed by not getting enough screen time, right? Like, not getting enough spotlight time, not getting enough agency to do what you wanted, all that kind of stuff. Like, there's so much in Blades where you have to subordinate your character to the group, and that is just not what beliefs are about. So I think that they could work really well in a 2-player version of this game. Because, yeah, it's just about the one character, so you can spend all the time you want to fulfill those. And I just love writing beliefs and fulfilling beliefs and talking about beliefs. That's all super good stuff. I love it. Add an XP trigger for learning something new about a faction. So this is a thing where... I don't know, maybe it's just me wanting to give an incentive to explore more of the world, but like I feel like this is kind of going off of the advancement system in Urban Shadows, which really like drives the PC to interact with NPCs. Yeah, so that's an XP trigger I thought might add something to the game. Oops. And increase the character XP track length by 1, because you're probably going to just be getting a little bit more XP. So, I don't know. Maybe that needs to be balanced a little bit. But these are my basic ideas for running the game with just one PC instead of a group. And I think it would more or less work. I looked at instead trying out Stars Without Number. Yeah, like... well, it said, like, I mean... okay. Okay, the murder hobo thing. Oh yeah, I've seen that. Sure, I've seen that. Oh boy, have I seen that. The game is supposed to... okay, yeah, oh boy. The game is supposed to discourage murder hobo behavior because the players are stuck in one place and they're in a rather oppressive situation. But I feel like the game doesn't really know where it wants to stand with that, because John Harper has said in interviews that if a PC wants to destroy something in Blades in the Dark, there is nothing that can stop them, right? Like, it will... They will take tons of consequences for doing it, but there's no limit really on what PCs can do. They are world-destroying monsters. Like, you know, I don't think that's the exact verbiage he used, but like he made it very clear that the players do have they are sort of these bulls in china shops, and another thing he said is that it's really important to remember that in all of his games, sort of a common touchstone is Indiana Jones. And I feel like that design philosophy in Blades in the Dark really butts up against this idea of it being a game about either the functioning of Doskvol as a city. You know, like, it butts up, it's in conflict. I'm not saying that one ruins the other, but they are in definite conflict with each other. And also this idea of Blades in the Dark sort of being a crime drama, right? That it's kind of sociological. It kind of says something about the lives of oppressed people. Like, yes, it does. But also these are oppressed people who are indestructible superheroes who can kill anybody they want, right? Like, that is... It's like... I think maybe what he was going for there is this idea of, like, yes, you experience the oppression, yes, there are consequences, yes, you're going to stress out, but you nevertheless can engage in a kind of power fantasy about fighting back against oppression that is just not possible in real life or in any kind of, like, sort of, you know, like, social realist fiction, right? So I still have incredibly mixed feelings about that aspect of Blades in the Dark. And that is I feel like there's a lot less conflict there in Scum and Villainy, which is one reason why I'm attracted to running it, because it says in Scum and Villainy that the characters are heedless adventurers who shoot first and ask questions later. It's like, okay, so they're murder hobos. All right, fine. Like, you know, be Indiana Jones, right? Just, like, go to places and wreck shop, right? Like, just fine. Let's do it. Let's do Pulp Fiction, right? Like, let's do pulp adventures. If that's what this game is designed to do, then let's just do it instead of really trying to juggle these competing design concerns that you run into in Blades in the Dark, which I think can be productive in that game, but boy, is it tough. It's really hard to it's really hard to maintain tone consistency, or not. It's hard to maintain sort of a shared understanding of what the campaign is about, especially if you have people coming and going from the game. And I feel like I have hack ideas for Blades in the Dark to make it something that is much more strictly defined at the start, right? Like, I'm like, no, you don't get to choose just whatever playbooks you want, right? You're going to have like a set of PCs you can play from. They have a very clear situation, and they have a very clear concern that they're engaging with. And I feel like if you do that, it could help to keep things in some kind of like non-gonzo territory. Because I feel like there's two things that happen in a Blades in the Dark campaign. On the one hand, it can go towards the murder hobo story. On the other hand, it's just a matter of time. Like, you can just start counting down the number of sessions at the beginning of a Blades in the Dark game until the players become a cult, or everything just becomes about ghosts and spirits and demons. Because as soon as you have one character in that game who is interested in weird stuff, the setting and the mechanics are going to just encourage so hard that the game moves away from that social realist concern, that sociological concern, and towards funky ghost shit, right? Like, oh man. Yeah, I have so many feelings about Blades in the Dark. It is an eternal sort of fascination to me. Yeah, like Dusk Till Dawn, totally, right? Totally. You're so right, Blake. It's so true. Yep, exactly. Exactly. That is pretty much how those games go. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna talk about, like, you know, the borderlands on the U.S.-Mexico border, and like the culture of the border, and all that kind of stuff, and then vampires. Which is not to say that Dusk Till Dawn is a bad movie, or that Blades of the Dark is a bad game. It's just that, boy, it is vexing. It is vexing to me as a GM. But, you know, I guess that helps to maintain my fascination with it. Definitely want to run more Blades. I'm not saying I don't want to run more Blades. I'm just saying I feel like I need to do some experimentation with how I run Blades. Yes, because that last campaign I ran, the Silkworms game, it felt like that was just... I was desperately trying to maintain some coherence in the game, and it just began to careen completely off the rails. And that was because it was an open table game, but I think there were mechanical things in Blades in the Dark that also encouraged that sort of change. Yes. Wow. Okay, so that's my rant about Blades in the Dark for today. So speaking of which, brainstorming new design concepts. That's another thing I've been doing. I have I have what I think are some really cool ideas for making a game based on Blades in the Dark that is kind of a little bit like the Saga games, if you've ever played those, like the Kawazu RPGs, like Saga Frontier 2, Scarlet Graces, Romancing Saga, all those games where you have like an ensemble cast of different stories, which is something you'd be familiar with from like Octopath Traveler, right? Would be another thing. And so a little bit like that, right, where you have different protagonists, there's different stories, and it's a fantasy game, but also a little bit like Utama, right? So I previously made a PBTA game that was sort of an adaptation of Utama using Dungeon World, Perilous Wilds, and Funnel World, and then adding in some new stuff for my own. A little bit of Mouse Guard in there too. So I made this game called Dragons and Traveller's Tales, and I never really moved beyond the alpha test phase with it, not because I was dissatisfied with what it did, but because I really, really struggled to get beyond Utama. Like, it felt like it was a functional adaptation of Utama for PBTA, but at the same time, Utama is a game that obviously has its own... It's proprietary, right? It has its own author, it has its own publisher, and the game that I was writing was too derivative. Not like that is a bad thing. It's like designed fan fiction, which is like awesome. That's great. I had a fantastic time designing that game. I learned so much, and I had a really good time running it as well. You can go check out the video on this channel. It's such a damn good game. It's just so much fun. But I felt like I just couldn't get out of this box of like, Ryutama is Ryutama is Ryutama, and I can't make my own thing. And I think I finally may have started to come up with some ideas that are sufficiently distinct from Ryutama that I could begin to call them my own thing, right? That this is not Ryutama. This is a related game, right? It uses that similar idea of dragons telling stories to build worlds. But it also relies a lot on this idea of travel, right? But is not just a sort of adaptation of Ryutama for a different rule system. And so that is going to be based on Blades in the Dark. It's going to be a Forged in the Dark game. And it's going to be designed to be a 2-player game. So it has only the GM and 1 player. And it's going to be really, really, really focused on the idea of sharing metafictional control. And like sort of like making a game about world building, right? So yes, there are going to be what are the equivalent of scores in Blades in the Dark, which are in my game called Sojourns, and they're going to be basically short stories about the protagonists in the game. But you're going to move between protagonists just like you would in like a Saga game or an Octopath Traveler. And when you are in downtime, you're going to be, as the player, using your downtime activities to adjust the metafiction of the game. And the GM is just going to be there to nudge the fiction in certain directions when they want to, and also to play the NPCs. So I think it's going to be a really, really cool, multi-layered sort of game conversation. I'm really excited about it, and I definitely want to make this game, and I want to see this game actually get to market instead of just being a thing that languishes on my Google Drive because I don't have the rights to publish it. Yeah, so that's the thing I'm doing. And the last thing I'm doing here is I'm working on a paper on governance and game design. So I'm not going to talk about this all that much, but I'm working with a friend of mine who is a sustainability researcher, and we are looking at designing games to help with governance, and also to look at governance as a game between the Netherlands and Japan. So that's an exciting process to be involved in. It's still very early stages of work, but it's been cool to get exposed to this whole world of game design that is not really... Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, could you do a sci-fi skin of this game? Yeah, of course you could do that, right? Yeah, no problem. There's nothing, like, inherently fantasy about that sort of structure of play. It's just that, I guess the sort of heartwarming fantasy look and feel of Ryutama and this idea of like sort of collaboration and sort of care and how that is related to making stories and building things, that's all like really really, really attractive to me. I love that stuff. Very similar to like Legend of Mana, an old PS1 RPG, but also could be compared to what is it? What do they call it? It's Ryutama. It is a They have a weird name for it. Here it is. Natural fantasy RPG. Yeah. So, you know, this idea of these, like, characters who aren't really designed for, like, fighting or adventure necessarily, but, like, are travelers. That kind of stuff is all, like, super interesting to me. I love this kind of fiction. It's a little bit like storybook. Yeah, so that is my main drive in making this game, because I think that what it does, as opposed to a science fiction setting, is that it creates a very sort of like friendly and supportive table atmosphere, which you don't necessarily get when you, say, make a science fiction game or setting in Microscope. Having that sort of metafictional or premise of, like, oh, this is about, like, helping people out and having you know, heartwarming travel stories and that kind of thing. It does create a different sort of collaborative dynamic. That's kind of what attracts me so much to this concept. But more fun, less work. Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that if I was to design a similar game for science fiction, boy, I like that idea you have of, like, super AI ships creating things. Like, it's very culture. And maybe I would kind of take it in the same direction as the culture and make it so that the AIs have a little bit of, like, an ironic or sort of goofy personality. I think that could be a good way to go with it, instead of just saying, okay, let's make a sci-fi setting, which can be something that I feel. Well, I mean, it works great in Microscope. I've done it before. But I think that if I was to make a game that was like a science fiction world-making game, I'd want to try to at least improve or offer something a little bit different than Microscope, which is already just a really good game for doing that. Or, of course, Stars Without Number, also very, very good at that. Yes. So that is another thing I have been working on. Okay. So what's next? I'm going to be iterating on All Systems Nominal's design as I get playtest information. I'm going to be doing some rebalancing. Ultimately, my goal with All Systems Nominal is to do something similar to Stars Without Number, where there will be a free version and there will be a paid version, a deluxe version, or what I'm going to call the up-armored version, because I love Brigador, and I want to give my homage to Brigador's up-armored edition. Yeah, so I'm in the free version. I want to keep things very terse, just like, this is what you need to play the game. Do with it what you want. In the up-armored edition, I'm going to have more information about creating a setting, about adapting different things for the game, about running the game as mercenaries versus running the game as soldiers, all that kind of stuff you would expect to see in a full-featured game. I want to include some of that in there. So I want to look at something that's maybe about double the length for the paid version. But to begin with, I want to get the free version sort of nailed down and together. And that's what I'm going to be doing after playtesting. And I need to somehow find time to do more playtesting. Because if this is a thing that I'm actually going to be selling to people, I want it to be, you know, functional. Even though it's an incomplete game in a sense, and there's a lot of openness to their hacking that's involved. I at least want the core to work well together. So part of the progress for the game is going to be moving towards the layout stage. So once I have the rules sort of together, and once I have an outline of what I'm going to write for the Up Armored edition, then I think I can maybe start moving towards layout. I'm going to get somebody else to do the layout for me because I don't have InDesign skills. So it's going to be very expensive, but what can you do? I only have the skills I have, and I only have the time I have. So InDesign is incredibly expensive, and I basically figured I'd rather spend that money on hiring someone to do a cool layout for the game than to do some amateurish thing and still be out, you know, X hundreds of dollars giving that money to Adobe for access to InDesign. Right. Getting Dragons and Traveler's Tales variant to alpha. So this is my game I was just talking to you about. This is the new design concept, the Blades hack I was talking about, making fantasy worlds. I'm gonna try to get that to some kind of alpha stage. I'm gonna wrap up my Burning Wheel campaign that's been on this channel. So we missed some time. We missed 2 weeks there because of scheduling problems. But we're going to be playing again tomorrow, so I'm very excited about that. I hope we get some cool stories out of that. And when I am in Canada in August, I actually managed to get my hands on the... I think this should be it. This thing, yeah. The Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition red box. So this is a released on 2010, released in 2020. Sorry, in 2010. It was a late era 4th edition product. And it was designed in the Essentials line of 4th edition games. So this line of books here. So we had the Rules Compendium. We had different players' handbooks, depending on the class you wanted to play. I actually don't have the full Essentials series. I only have the Rules Compendium and the 2 players' handbooks. I'm missing the Dungeon Master's book, so I might pick that up this year. Essentially... as you're saying there, Blake, it's definitely good to intro 4E like an MMO, based on your tank, crowd control, that kind of thing, those roles things. In my particular group, I have one player, my dad, who has played a ton of Neverwinter Nights. So he knows the 3.5 rules really well. I also have another player who's played a lot of Baldur's Gate and a lot of MOBAs. So I think that MOBAs would be a good place to start for explaining the different classes in that game, because neither player has really spent too much time with MMOs, but... you know, Neverwinter Nights was kind of like borderline MMO. Like, it was like not massively multiplayer, but like there were a number of players on the persistent servers. Definitely had some of that appeal. So the starter set is a modified version of these Essentials rules for 4th edition. And it's a little bit simplified. So I think that it's going to be good for like a 2-session kind of run through. I'm pretty excited to run this because it has pre-generated characters and stuff, right? So you can choose your character from here. And it should be pretty simple to introduce. Last year I ran Dungeon World for the same people. This year I'm going to try running 4E. And I don't know. I have a soft spot for 4E, so I'm excited to run it as a simple game that will not take a whole lot of work to prep or to get through, and not have like excessively long turns because it's just going to be low level play. I'm going to hack in a couple things from Strike into that game. Reaction abilities for enemies. So if the PC attacks an enemy and they miss, there is a reaction ability from the enemy that is procced, which is going to function kind of like a 7 to 9 result or a miss in Dungeon World. So basically, the idea here is that if you miss, then something bad happens to you, instead of it just being you miss, that's it, that's the end of the story, which is a really boring thing in Dungeons and Dragons. Skill challenges, I don't know. I'm going to look at the adventure and see what I can do in the way of skill challenges. I'm sure there are some in there, and I might do some structured skill challenges, but I don't have the PDF of this text. I only have the hard copy, and it's in Canada. So I haven't read it yet, but I'm excited because I've heard this is a good adventure. So I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work out, but I am pretty excited to play this. I'm honestly very excited to play this. It's going to be fun to have it on the table, moving the little chits around, and yeah, basically like a war game. Or a board game, you could say. I guess I'm kind of thinking about it as like, what do you call it? Gloomhaven super light edition. That's kind of what I'm looking forward to here. Yeah. All right. And to continue wrapping up things here, I'm going to prep for GauntletCon. GauntletCon is happening in October, and I'm going to be running Operators, a game by kind of like HeroQuest. Yeah, basically. Insert Ameritrash fantasy game here for what I'm looking for in terms of my 4E experience. Yes, so GauntletCon. I will be running Operators. It is a game by Kyle Simons based on like sort of spy thriller movies like Mission Impossible or Bourne Identity. And it is kind of sort of based on Fate. And it's a very action-oriented game, and I wanted something for GauntletCon that would be very fast-paced and that we could get through in one sitting, right? Because, I don't know, I mean, a lot of games, you do a one-shot, and it's kind of like, but like it always feels like, yeah, that was a lot of fun, but you know, I wish we would have had a chance to continue this story. But Operators is kind of designed to be structured like an action movie, so I feel like we can probably actually get through a full sort of movie arc, and that is what the game is designed to do. So I'm pretty excited to run it. I'm pretty intimidated to run it, honestly, because I've read through the book. I helped contribute to the proofreading of the book a little bit, but I haven't run it, and I haven't played it. So I'm excited, but a little bit intimidated, but nevertheless, it's going to be a good time. And Unlike normal operators, this is going to be very much based on Ghost in the Shell. Kokaku Kidotai in Japanese. And we're going to have, instead of section, section 7, I think, in Ghost in the Shell, or is it section 9? Oh, man. Yeah, section 9, yeah. So instead of section 9, which is like a part of the Japanese government, we're going to have like an international sort of section 9, right? And they're going to go around the world solving cyber crimes and stuff, and fighting terrorists. So it should be a blast. I think Operators is a perfect game for Ghost in the Shell style fiction. So I'm really excited about that. And then also I just want to write more for Gauntlet Codex. I don't know what I'm going to write yet, but when the opportunity presents itself again, and I have the time, I'd like to write more. So that's where I'm at. That's where I've been doing all this time since I've streamed, a few weeks or something. Yeah. So it's a busy design life, but enjoyable. So I'm getting tired and it's hot. I think I'm gonna wrap up this stream, and I might move the Hexcrawl stream to tomorrow night. I think that might be better. So I will actually. Yeah, Vizier the Raccoon on Pixie Dust. Sure. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think the one other thing I gotta say it's next is I'm in so many playtests. So many playtests. In August, I am in your playtest, Blake, but I am in many other playtests as well. So that's quite exciting. Yes, but that will be all on the Gauntlet calendar. And yeah, so tomorrow we're gonna work on not the pitch, this thing. I've got the very, 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 very bare bones of my encounter tables. So we got grasslands, river, mountains, forest, coast, and hills. We're going to come up with encounters based on the meter mark monster tables, and then import those into Vagabonds of Dovid. And also because the monster selection in meter mark is a little bit sparse, for those cells that I can't fill out, I'm actually going to just put like Perilous Wilds in there, and then I'm going to use, I think it's this one here, this awesome site here, where if you just want to roll up a creature, you just click on here and it gives you a result from the Perilous Wilds random generation tables. So you can just, you're like, oh, I don't like that one. Okay, here we go. There's more creatures, yeah. Super useful, but I do want to have that meter mark flavor in there, so I'm first going to roll on there, and if that doesn't give me something, then I'm going to go to Perilous Wilds for my hex crawling. So, yeah, that's the plan for tomorrow, and I will see you then to cover that. Thanks for watching. Bye.